I've gotten 100% response rates. Dan Waldschmidt gets 100% response rate to his swords. I'm saying now that 100% should be the new baseline for a response. And I'm not going to ask you to guess what the new records are, but the new record for ROI to a contact campaign is 69,500,000%.
I want to welcome you to my sales podcast, where we have one focus and one focus only. That is helping you, the sales community, and sales leaders create more conversations with more qualified buyers, ultimately leading to improving your sales productivity and closing more deals. Each show, you will hear from sales leaders, practitioners, and influencers to help you find, engage, and connect with more buyers. I'm Mario Martinez Jr., and you're now listening to the Selling with Social Sales Podcast. This episode is brought to you by Gong.io, the #1 conversion intelligence platform for sales. Gong helps you achieve revenue success, which means you win more deals, skyrocket rep performance, and gain critical market intelligence. Get powerful visibility into your customer conversations with Gong. Head over to Gong.io to get started. All right, ladies and gentlemen, here we are on this podcast, this episode. We're going to be talking to the man, the myth, and the legend himself, Stu Heinecke. And this is the author of How to Get a Meeting with Anyone. You heard that right, everyone. That's exactly what we're going to be talking about today, is how to be able to create more conversations and break through to our accounts. And I want to welcome my friend. He is also the nominated Hall of Famer as a marketer, if I'm not mistaken, a marketing Hall of Famer. And we've got the author of How to Get a Meeting with Anyone. And he also has his own podcast. So if you're not listening to his podcast, it's a great sales podcast called How to Get a Meeting with Anyone as well. And that is his podcast. And something that you don't know, and I'm going to steal a little bit of his thunder here on this one, my very first interaction was an email that came directly from Stu to me, and it was he is a cartoonist, actually, an editorial cartoonist for the Wall Street Journal, and he actually sent me this really great cartoon. I forget what it was about, but it's what triggered me to say, Stu, I want to be your friend. Stu, man, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me on. That's great.
I'm excited to have you here with me. We've been friends for a while now here and really working with each other and learning, and amplifying the art of selling and getting more conversations and getting the meetings. And so I'm excited because you're going to bring some great insights here to our sales leaders and our sales folks. So do me a favor. I kind of stole all your thunder. I know I did with the introduction. Tell us something. Give us a little background about yourself.
I've got probably the craziest background in the world. As you mentioned, I'm the author of How to Get a Meeting with Anyone, and I've got a new one coming out, Get the Meeting, in October. I'm a business author, but I'm also one of the Wall Street Journal cartoonists, and I'm a Hall of Fame nominated marketer. Those are three crazy elements for anybody's background. But you know what that's allowed me to do is break through to just about anybody, Mario. It's been amazing. I've been breaking through to people I should never be able to reach my whole career. Yeah, for sure. Now, how did you become an editorial cartoonist? So like teaching salespeople how to get a meeting, and now I'm also an editorial cartoonist. Like it's just like, I don't know. They just seem so polar opposite. Although you probably have used this gift that you have to be able to get into people's offices, is what I would imagine. Yeah, I was about to say, they seem crazy, but they actually mesh together really well. And so here's the thing. You asked how did I become a cartoonist you don't go anywhere to learn it. You just do it. You connect with other cartoonists and find out what they're doing. You watch their work. You look at the work that's being published, and it takes a long time to become a good cartoonist, actually. So that was my passion. I've always been so interested in cartooning, and so I just kept at it. You have to develop a thick skin, and you're going to get rejected a lot, but you just keep at it. And eventually, I became one of the Wall Street Journal cartoonists.
Do you call it cartooning? Like a cartoonist produces not cartoons, but what is the actual word called?
if you produce cartoons, you're a cartoonist. The thing you produce is cartoons, but the act of it, I think, is, I always call it cartooning.
All right. So we'll call it cartooning. I love it. It was so interesting that when I first got your email, I remember it was a cartoon. Is that the right phrase? It was a cartoon?
Yeah.
It was actually a graphic, though.
It was probably personalized, right? It was about you.
Yeah.
And I don't know which one I sent you either. I've got a lot of them.
No, that's okay. But I just want to make sure, like, it's called a cartoon that you sent me, but even though it's a graphic image.
What that actually is a single panel cartoon.
Okay.
So there's one drawing, and then underneath there's a typeset caption.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It was such an interesting way to connect with me, and you definitely personalized it. I remember that, and it made me be like, okay, I got to reach back out. I got to reach out to this guy. So that was great. That was a while ago, but I love it, man. And you've had some great success with your podcast over the last year, How to Get a Meeting with Anyone, and then your book that came out was back in 4 years ago, 4 years ago,
2016. So 3 years ago, yeah, something like that.
Yeah. And you've got the next book coming out. What is the name of the next book?
So the next one is called Get the Meeting.
Get the Meeting.
Yeah, and I guess that might sound like, oh, you just did another one. Right. But actually, the thing is, as soon as I finished How to Get a Meeting with Anyone, I heard all these stories from more people who were saying, here's how I do it. Here's how I break through. And all these amazing stories. It's just amazing, Mario, what people are doing out there just in the world. And they've been doing it for a long time, really, but coming up with these really clever, audacious ways of breaking through to people. And God, if you don't get meetings, you can't sell. It's just a basic part of selling.
That's exactly right.
So the new book has got more case studies, and it's got photography this time, because a lot of people were saying, God, I really wish that I could have seen what these campaigns look like. Well, now in this next book, there's a lot of photography, but then there's also a new model, and there's a new campaign form. There's all kinds of new stuff, and it makes kind of a very, very crazy, bold promise.
Oh, you're going to leave me hanging on that one.
The bold promise is, when I was interviewing everybody for the first book, How to Get a Meeting with Anyone, I was saying, hey, by the way, I use my cartoons, but what you're using this, that, all kinds of things. What's this thing that we're doing called? Is there a name for it? Nobody had a name for it. So I called it contact marketing in the first book. And in the second book, I've expanded the contact marketing model, or updated it a bit. But the big update is, I think we should be setting the baseline for response at 100%.
Oh, look at that. I love that.
So,
every sales leader listening in right now is saying, yes, I would love to see 100% response rate to setting a meeting.
Or what's this guy smoking?
Yeah, exactly. Or what's it smoking? Yeah, of course. Because the numbers are staggeringly low. But before we get into the content, I want to know more about this contact marketing component here. Do me a favor. Tell me something. And I'm looking for something juicy, man. Tell me something nobody would know about you, even if they were looking at your social profiles. Give me something juicy. Just don't confess.
I'm married to a penthouse cover model.
Really?
Yeah. And it kind of relates back to contact marketing. Or let's say, at least the ability to get through to people.
All right. I don't know
how much detail you want me to go into. But
no. I don't know how far I should go down on that particular question right now. That's a first. You stumped me on that one, Stu. All right. That's so nobody would know, a penthouse model, that you're married. How long you been married for?
Oh, gosh. 28 years.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. So I think I'm going to stop the questions there.
I noticed you're turning red a little bit.
No, I'm not turning red. You threw me for a loop. There's not oftentimes people throw me for a loop. And as my listeners...
Usually I have a stamp collection, or I don't know.
They're like, I'm not supposed to talk about that, Stu.
That's right. Oh, my God.
Hilarious. All right. I love that. Fantastic. All right. So that we got something new that nobody else would know. I want to go back to this term that you talked about a second ago, and it was the contact marketing. Now, sellers and sales leaders are listening right now. Whenever I hear the word marketing, anything related to sales, that's not us. That's what I think. It's not us. Now, I do have a saying, and I say that salespeople are no longer salespeople. Salespeople are smarketers. Mm-hmm. We are salespeople and marketers. I look at this and I say, marketing markets one to many, right? One to many. Whereas salespeople, we market one to one. So we have actually almost pretty much the same exact job as a marketer. That's why I call it the smarketer. But when I hear anything like contact marketing, I immediately think, well, this is not a sales thing. This is a marketing thing. But I think you've got a different perspective on this. And you've been talking a lot about this, about, in your last book, and I think in your upcoming book as well, really about how to use this to break through to accounts. So first off, what is it? And let's talk a little bit more about it.
Sure. Well, and I love your comment about sales and marketing being so separate, and they shouldn't be. Actually, we talk about them being siloed all the time. They should not be siloed. They should be working together. So contact marketing really it's a fusion of marketing and selling. It uses micro-focused campaigns. So these are marketing quality campaigns that are used to break through to people who are of great importance. It's really kind of that simple. And you mentioned also a great point that marketing is almost always one-to-many, and smarketing or selling is one-to-one. But in contact marketing, it is one-to-one marketing and selling to support selling.
So its definition is, give me that one more time.
What? The fusion of marketing and selling.
Okay.
It uses micro-focused campaigns to create contact with high-value prospects and accounts.
Okay, you got to give me an example, because I, as the salesperson, sales leader, when I hear micro-focused campaigns, I immediately like my red alert goes off. Like, that's not us. That's not us. That's not me. Micro-focused, what? Like, I don't run micro-focused anything. I just call. I just email. I just engage on social. So work me into this now. First off, how did you get started in this concept of contact marketing? And how are you leveraging it? I assume that you're leveraging it to connect with people of some sort, I suppose.
Of course, yeah. We know I'm a cartoonist. I'm going to just share with you one of the ways that I use cartoons to break through to people. All of the cartoons, or almost all the cartoons I've created, the ones that are in the Wall Street Journal are not personalized, but everything else, all the ones that are used in marketing purposes are personalized. So they're written so that I can drop a first and last name into the caption. When I'm using a cartoon, here's what I do. I put together this big thing. I call it a big board. And it's 18 by 24 inch, quarter-inch thick foam core board that gets shipped in this custom corrugated packaging. It's got cartoon art all over it. The board itself has a cartoon on one side about the recipient. And then on the other side, it has all the branding and messaging. And essentially, it's a message from the sender to the recipient explaining who they are, why they want to meet, and what the next steps are. It's essentially that. But here's the thing. Here's the really cool thing. When I'm trying to connect with people who are, they're important. They might be CEOs, let's say. A lot of times that's what I'm doing. They have assistants, and assistants have a job to do. And most salespeople seem to not understand quite what that job is. They want to circumvent the assistant, but you don't want to do that. You want to turn them into an ally. So here's what I do. It's what I do, but I also do this for clients. So let's say a client rep is using one of my big boards to break through. First thing that happens is they're going to call the assistant and say, "Hi, my name is so-and-so. I'm calling because I have a print of a cartoon by one of the Wall Street Journal cartoonists, and it's about your boss." Well, the assistants are usually saying, "Wait, what? Really? Whoa, okay." They're not screening you out. They're not automatically gatekeeping and keeping you out. They're listening. They're like talent scouts. They want to know that you've brought something of interest and value and relevance to their boss. Otherwise, you get shut down. But if those things are present, they're going, "Really? Okay." They want to make it happen. When let's say one of our clients' reps uses the big board system, that's the first thing they do. "Hi, I'm calling and I'm sending a print of a cartoon by one of the Wall Street Journal cartoonists. It's about your boss. And would you mind if I send you, I want it to be a surprise to your boss, but not to you. Would you mind if I send you an email so that I could just give you all these details?" "Oh, sure. Well, here's my email address," essentially. And then they'll send them a cartoon card, and they'll also follow up when the FedEx tracking number is available. So by the time the big board actually arrives, the sales rep's already had 4 touches with the executive assistant, and the executive assistant is anxious to help because, for crying out loud, this is a cartoon by one of the Wall Street Journal cartoonists. It's about their boss. And then when that comes, it's usually, remember you said earlier in our conversation, you said, "I got a cartoon from Stu, and I had to meet him." And that's the effect that I want to create, or we want to create always in these contact marketing campaigns. We want it to be so astonishing and compelling that, and obviously relevant and filled with value, but certainly astonishing that they say, "God, I love the way this person thinks. We've got to meet." And I think that's exactly what happened between us. So now we're doing it on a bigger scale. And I know sales enablement folks are listening in. This is what they do. They help open the doors for their sales team to make contact with their most important accounts. It's not everything, but it's the essence of selling, because if you can't get through, nothing else is going to happen.
So is this something that we could use as part of like our ABM strategy and looking at targeting high profile accounts? And
that's exactly what it is.
Okay.
That's exactly what it is.
Now we're talking my language here. I understand exactly what you're driving at. So this is another high touch point, right? That allows us to be able to get our foot in the door that's hyper targeted and hyper focused and personalized to the individual buyer. But here's my question. Do sales teams, as an example, like our sales team, would we hire you to and say, hey, we want you to create an individual cartoon? Would you call it a single panel or a
single panel cartoon? Yeah.
Single panel cartoon. Or are these things that you have in like a repository that I as a sales rep can go to the site and, customize it myself?
No, there's a lot of hands-on creative work that we do to work with you. But actually, the thing I want to do is I want to pull back away from cartoons. You don't have to be a cartoonist to do this.
Sure.
Cartoons aren't the only thing that you can use. So I think you probably know Dan Waldschmidt.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, okay. Good friend of mine.
Unbelievable guy. I hope you don't run races against him, because
no, I don't run any races. I wouldn't even bother to try to run a race against the guy.
You got to explain. Dan is an ultra competitive athlete. He runs 100-mile races and he wins. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, no, it's not something I would do.
So the thing is, for my book, actually for both books, I interviewed him because he had this really cool way of reaching out. We have to explain. He's also the author of Edgy Conversations. He's one of the top sales bloggers in the world. Again, Edgy Conversations is the name of his blog as well.
He was on our podcast as well earlier this year.
Oh, you got to check him out then. You got to check out his episode. So actually, he's a turnaround specialist. And so he shared with me this really interesting way that he reaches out to CEOs of companies that have just announced earnings estimates, missed earnings estimates, I should say. And so when he finds one, he just combs the news every morning. And when he finds one, he has a beautiful sword. Man, I wish I could show you. It's a huge sword. It's this big sword made by the prop maker who made all the swords for the movie Gladiator. Yep. Beautiful swords. And so he has this sword made up, and he has the CEO's name engraved on it, and one of his inscriptions, if you're not all in, you're not in at all. And he has it put in this beautiful wooden box, and there's a handwritten note. Handwritten notes actually come up a lot in these campaigns, but a handwritten note that said, "Dear so-and-so, business is war, and I noticed you lost a battle recently. I just want to let you know if you ever need a few extra hands in battle, we've got your back." That's it. I don't even think he puts his card in there. There's no logo. There's nothing. So you might say, well, there's no branding going on. But actually, there's huge branding going on there, because Dan is the kind of guy, he's the kind of audacity that he would do this. And by the way, it costs him $1,000 every time he produces one of those. But guess what kind of response rate he gets to that?
Oh, 100%.
It's like, oh, you know him. So,
absolutely.
I'm sure he's told you about him.
Yeah. I actually,
it was 100%
have that on video on our podcast that we did. He actually showed his sword. Yeah, but I actually hadn't heard this story, but he did show the sword for sure.
Yeah. Well, so now think of what he's using though. That sword, I mentioned before, there's lots of branding because he's the kind of guy who would do this. What audacity. And what else do you want from a turnaround specialist? Yeah,
absolutely.
Big solutions. But so here's the thing. What Dan is using is a visual metaphor. He's not cartooning, by the way, right? He's using a visual metaphor. That sword really has a lot of meaning because it represents the value he brings to the battle, right?
Yeah.
So there are all kinds of visual metaphors you could use. I'm sure you've had John Rulin on before too.
I have not, no.
Oh God, you got to get him on. John is the author of Giftology, and he started out as a Cutco knives salesperson.
Yep.
He discovered that if he's a wizard at giving gifts. When he gives a Cutco block of knives, he sends it to the CEO with the block and a note and the first knife. The rest of the knives are yet to come. And then he sends a knife every week. And he said, what the perfection of this is that the CEO will be at home, and if it's either a woman or a man, doesn't matter. Finally, the spouse is saying, well, these knives are really terrific. They're really nice knives. I think they're like $200 a knife. And eventually the spouse says, when are you going to do business with this guy?
Right.
So it's brilliant. There are all kinds of methods for breaking through, and you can turn it into a campaign that is replicable and scalable. So it's really sales enablement.
Yeah, I love some of those ideas. Now, folks that are listening in are oftentimes we have sales leaders and sales reps, and we just don't have that type of budget, right? To spend any more than say $20, right, on ideas. But I'm sure, especially in the new book that you've got coming out, Get the Meeting, you've probably spent some alternative ideas or some additional ideas on how they could get a meeting with somebody else. You want to talk a little bit about the context of the book and then what's new inside that?
Yeah. Well, I was saying that it's meant to be a companion to How to Get a Meeting with Anyone. And as soon as I finished How to Get a Meeting with Anyone, it came out, I was hearing from all these people saying, I do it this way and I use this. And I'm going, oh my God, there's a whole new book here.
Right.
A lot of people love How to Get a Meeting with Anyone, but they would say, oftentimes, I wish I could see what the campaigns look like. So this time, it's filled with photography. And it's got over 60 new case histories or case studies. But then there are all these different new methods for breaking through. One of the ones that I think is really interesting is, there are a bunch of them. And using AI and AR, VR, virtual reality, artificial intelligence, and augmented reality, and so on. Those are interesting. But Curtis Brooks was one of the ones who got a hold of me right away after the book came out. And Curtis has this really interesting method for breaking through. He creates unsolicited proposals, and they're expressed in a storyboard fashion, and they're filled with a lot of insight. It shows that they did their homework, I guess, essentially. And it's all coordinated with the executive assistant. I mean, it's sort of almost like they won't even do it if the executive assistant says, no, I don't think he'd be interested or she would be interested. But they're almost always are interested. And what happens is that when they send these things out, what they end up getting is a response along the lines of, I love the initiative that you've just shown in putting together this proposal. Now, you've got a few things wrong. You made some assumptions that aren't quite right. Why don't we get together so I can correct those for you? And let's have a further conversation. And the other thing that's interesting about Curtis's approach is that at the last page, he's got this really formulated format for how these are laid out. On the last page, he's already researched who should be in the meeting. And he lists, here's who should be in the meeting. He's not asking for a meeting. He's actually saying, here's who should be in the meeting. Essentially, he's taking a meeting. He's just assuming that we're going to meet. And it works very, very well. I don't actually have numbers to share with you on that, but I know that it works really quite well. And that's pretty interesting. Gosh, I heard from another guy who creates infographics. They're beautifully done, and they tell a story without language. Any speaker of any language could understand the story.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's got a lot of metrics, and also it's got all sorts of research.
I got one for you. I'll tell you a story, and I think you probably use this as well. And it's how a salesperson in the local San Francisco Bay Area was able to reach me and book a meeting at his office to get me to go to his particular office. And I didn't realize that what was going on until I was already there sitting in the office and what was going on. It's a great story, and I thought it was excellent creativity by the salesperson. And here, I'll tell this story right after we listen to this message from our program sponsor. Take a listen. Opinions in sales are your worst enemy. Here's why. Your business has million-dollar questions that if you could answer with facts, you'd have an unfair advantage. Those questions are, what really separates your best reps from the rest? Why does half of your pipeline slip? And what's the best message to go to market with? If your answers were facts instead of opinions, you'd win the unfair share of your market. It turns out the truth is buried right underneath your nose. It's found in the customer conversations your team has every day. Introducing Gong.io. Gain powerful visibility into your customer conversations. With Gong, you'll win more deals, skyrocket rep success, and gain critical market intelligence that will help you achieve revenue success and win the lion's share of the wealth. Go to gong.io/demo to get started today. So right before that break, I was telling you, this salesperson, his name was Dustin, he reached out to me And he asked me, he said, the title was Podcast Guest, San Francisco Bay Area CEOs. And he said, hey, Mario, I'm reaching out. Actually wanted to look and see if you'd be interested in joining me as a guest on my show for Bay Area CEOs. If you would, blah, 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 blah. I'd love to be able to have a conversation and meet you face to face so we can record this, blah, blah, blah. Would you be open to providing some of your thought leadership for this particular show? And without even asking, normally what I usually do is, well, how many listeners do you have? Who's the target audience? It was so non-invasive. And I said, yeah, absolutely. How could we get it scheduled? Do you want to do it virtually? I prefer virtually. And he goes, well, actually, I'm here in the Bay Area. I live in Walnut Creek, and my office is pretty close to where your office is at. And so it'd be great if we can get together face-to-face. We'll record it live face-to-face. All I need is, about 45 minutes to an hour at most. So I said, well, I prefer virtually. He goes, well, all my equipment is, here at the office. So it'd be great to have you come in. And I was like, all right, fine, no problem. Where's your location? And he told me, I was like, oh, you're like 5 minutes away from me. I show up, we schedule it out. I show up and he says, oh, this is my office. Let me give you a tour. And I start walking around. He introduced me to a sales manager. He introduced me to a sales director. And then he walks me through like the whole office, and I see some signage. This is, where we do blah, blah, blah. This is where we have our meetings. And I was like getting this office tour, and I was like, okay, all right, that's great. It was nice to meet the sales manager, getting some warm fuzzies from the sales leaders. And then he takes me to this conference room. He says, are you comfortable here? Do you want some water? How about some coffee? I can get you that. The whole red carpet treatment. So then he sits down and he goes through, his podcast. Here's some questions I'm going to ask you. Are you comfortable? Blah, 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 blah. And I said, yeah, absolutely. So by about halfway into the podcast, it clicked. Wait a minute. This guy invited me to his podcast because he's going to prospect to me because he sells to small business CEOs, right? That was his target market. And I heard that as we were talking in the conversation. And it hit me. And so after the end, after we finished the podcast, and I said, all right, hold on. Let's stop you here for a second. Did you invite me to come and sit down and talk with you and record this podcast because I'm a target CEO that you're trying to get to? And he goes, well, I wanted your thought leadership, but of course, if we can expand the relationship. And I was like, no, buddy. Yes or no? Yes or no? And he was
but it can be both. See, that's the thing. It can be both.
It absolutely could be both.
You were providing thought leadership.
Without a doubt, absolutely 100%. But I'm that straight shooter, and so he was like, "Well, yes, of course. I hope that we can do business." And I was like, "Gosh darn it, that was brilliant, absolutely brilliant!" I just walked right into it. And let me tell you something, Stu. I received an email from him about maybe a couple months later, and I was absolutely floored and shocked over what I read. He said to me, I'm really frustrated. I said, well, why are you really frustrated? He said, because we had stayed in contact with each other, so he kind of built a little bit of a rapport, right? And he said, my sales manager and sales director have requested that I stop my podcast. And so before I reacted to it, I said, well, let me ask you.
Cold calling, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what they wanted him to do. That's exactly what they wanted him to do. And so I said, before I react to this, let me understand a few things. I said, number one, are you hitting your quota? No. Number two, how far behind are you? And he was like at 60, 70% of plan, something like that. And then I said, how does your leadership team measure productivity? Is it based upon how many cold calls you did? Yes. Okay. Are they measuring your emails? Yes, they are. Okay. So is your cold calling super low? Yes. Is your email super low? Yes. And you're behind quota? Yes. And so I said, so I got it. So their concern is they don't want you wasting time with all this other stuff, right, that you're doing. And he goes, but here's the thing. My pipeline is huge. And I'm having meaningful CEO level executive conversations. And that's what they're not getting. And I said, so the problem that you're having is converting. And I gave him some guidance. And I said, when we left afterwards, you published the podcast, but you never followed up with me and said, could we have a second conversation? Right. And that was because, I think he knew that, I was in a position to buy yet, but that's where he dropped it at. And then the next question is, okay, if you're not ready to buy, Mario, who do you know that are other CEOs that could use potentially my services, and ask for the referral and introduction? And that's where he was missing the mark. Ultimately, About 2 months later, he sent me another note saying that he got pulled into a meeting with the head of HR and with his sales director, and they ordered him, stop podcasting or you will be terminated because you need to hit the phones.
Wow.
What do you think about that?
Well, okay, a couple of problems.
Oh, and by the way, he ended up about 85% of his plan. So he wasn't at 100%. So he
improved. He improved. I think you put your finger right on the problem there. The one missing element was he wasn't converting. He wasn't following up, and he could have. And if he had a big pipeline, then start converting some of that.
Exactly.
And he did, right? He did. So I think that his managers were short-sighted.
100%.
They should have just said, okay, tell me what you're up to. Who have you had conversations with? Oh my God, really? And you could call these people. You've got 300 CEOs right now that you could call. Then look, start calling them, right?
Exactly.
Use this method. I mean, don't just pick up the phone book now and start calling.
That's right.
That's not what cold callers do, but almost like that. I have a story too I should share with you.
What is it?
So one of the guys that got in touch with me after How to Get a Meeting with Anyone came out, he contacted me and he said, I got to share my story with you. See, the thing is, I was just graduating college and I was hired right out of college to be a sales development rep at a late stage startup somewhere in your neighborhood, actually, in Silicon Valley. And the thing that they wanted us to do is they wanted us to make 100 phone calls a day. And what he was finding was that these 100 phone calls produced nothing or almost nothing. As
they normally do, nothing.
Yeah. I mean, it's just kind of untargeted. He was lamenting this with a friend of his over dinner, and the friend said, you got to get this book, How to Get a Meeting with Anyone. And he did. He read it, and he said, okay, great. I know what I'm going to do. So I was still going to make my 100 phone calls a day, but he decided he'd research one of the accounts that no one was able to get through to from his company, and actually the contact there. So he did a little bit of profile scraping, and he discovered that the guy was really into cooking, family, and technology. So 2 out of 3, he had an apron. He bought an apron and had it embroidered with an Arthur C. Clarke quote, something about technology sufficiently advanced, looks like magic, something like that. And he sent the apron to him. Well, he got through to him right away, and a conversation ensued, and a 6-figure deal ensued right away. And he said, okay, that's pretty cool, and kept doing that. Now his cohort started noticing what he was doing, and they're saying, well, actually, they're noticing that he's getting through, and he's actually getting sales, and no one else is. And they asked, what are you doing? And he said, well, he explained it, and, well, could you help us do that? Sure. So first one he'd helped with, one of his colleagues said, okay, here's another guy. Nobody's been able to reach him from the company. Let's see what we can do. And so Dom said, okay, his name was Dom Steinman. So Dom said, okay, let's do a profile scrape. Let's find out what the guy's into. And they discovered falconry is his big passion. So they went to a falconry site, asked the owner, what kind of a gift should we give someone who's really into falconry? And he pointed them to a glove. They wear these big gloves. That's what the birds sit on. And they're really ornate and beautiful gifts. So they bought it, but they downloaded the picture, sent the picture to the prospect, to the account, and said they're sending it over, and I'd love to have a few minutes with you. And the guy wrote back immediately. Now, this is someone they hadn't reached. No one could reach the guy. But the fellow wrote back right away, and he said, hey, that's really cool. Thank you so much. I'm really not a prospect for what you're selling, so that's why you haven't heard back from me. But that's really cool. Thank you so much. Well, then the glove arrives. Not the picture, but now the glove arrives. Mm-hmm. The guy was so excited, he got right back in touch, and he said, hey, remember I told you I'm not a prospect? Well, I'm not. I'm not a prospect for what you do, but I know of 3 other CIOs who are looking for exactly what you're doing, and I make an introduction. Thank you so much for the glove. I love it. Another 6-figure deal ensued. Well, this started spreading throughout the sales organization, and finally the managers started showing some interest, but they're saying, what's going on? What happened here? What's the bump in sales? And they all pointed to Dom, and they explained what they've been doing, and so they changed everything, but they promoted Dom to sales manager, and that was a year into his employment. Then this company actually was acquired by Cisco for $4.7 billion. So within a year of graduating from college, he became a sales manager at a $4.7 billion company, multinational company, and it all had to do with contact marketing.
What's interesting about these stories is, in your story, the sales managers heard what was going on and they adopted. In my story, the sales managers heard what was going on and said, you're doing it wrong. Go back to this old way. What disturbed me about the story that I told was the sales managers, sales leaders could not look at the creativity of how somebody was leveraging, in your case, is this aspect of contact marketing, right? Like these are some of the great things and great ideas of how to penetrate someone's account. And the problem wasn't that he was getting meetings, because he was getting meetings. The problem is he wasn't learning how to convert into business.
Yep.
Right. So those are two different skills, right?
By the way, who wasn't doing their job there?
In this case, so the sales leader in this case,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
The sales leader and the sales leader, what was happening is the other sales reps were saying, well, Johnny's not doing this. Why is it that Johnny doesn't have to cold call and he can, do this other thing? And so now they felt like they had an inequity. So they needed to balance out. No. If you're looking at this and you individualize your approach to sales management and sales leadership, you look at it and say, man, Johnny's getting these solid meetings with CEOs, but he's not converting them. The issue is not how to get the meeting. The issue is how to get them to convert into a real pipeline, which then converts into a real sale. That was the issue.
Yeah, and by the way, how could that turn into a new process for the company?
Exactly.
Scale it up.
So now what you do is you say, Johnny, you know what? We're thinking about how we can have someone in marketing do this. Now I want all you 7, 24, 50 sellers, whatever it is, I want you guys out prospecting to CEOs and invite them to the podcast that the company's going to host.
Yeah.
That's what a smart sales leader would have done.
Absolutely. Yes.
It was wild to me, Stu. It was wild. And I'm thinking, you're getting meetings with the right people, and you're going to now force this rep to go back to freaking cold calling, which has a less than 3% response rate. Do you have stupid written on your forehead?
Crazy. They should read my book.
Well, absolutely. Speaking of your book, let's talk about when the new book, Get the Meeting, is going to be released. When is that coming out?
It's coming out October 15th. It's it's called Get the Meeting. And by the way, contact marketing, it's starting to catch on as a valid description of a form of marketing. I just want to tell you this real quickly, that I started by creating direct mail campaigns for publishers, for the big magazines. When I was in direct mail, direct response, they used to say that 1% response rate was a typical response. There is no such thing as a typical response, but they used to say, if you get a 1% response rate, you're doing great. And by the way, 100% response rates are impossible.
Yeah.
Well, then I went into that, sort of drifted into and named contact marketing. And the metrics in contact marketing are just crazy. I would say it a little differently, but if we're on a show.
We're on air.
They're just crazy. I've gotten 100% response rates. Dan Waldschmidt gets 100% response rate to his swords. I'm saying now that 100% should be the new baseline for a response. And I'm not going to ask you to guess what the new records are, but the new record for ROI to a contact campaign is 69,500,000%.
Whoa. Hold on. You said that way too fast.
Yeah.
What is the ROI?
Crazy. 69,500,000%.
Wow.
That was a contact campaign run they used a Facebook ad. They ran it for 2 days, and it resulted in rollout of their product in Walmart, and it changed their valuation. It changed everything. It netted a $1.5 million initial order, but because they were rolled out in Walmart, suddenly the value of the company changed, and all of the other retailers wanted them, and it changed everything from a $28 ad to get in touch with the buyers.
Wowzers. Okay.
So, and then the highest response we're seeing so far to a contact marketing campaign is now actually 300%. So what's that? What's that about, right? I mean, how do you get 300% to a campaign, to anything? And the answer is that some of these campaigns are so astonishing, so compelling, that people will take them and they'll show them around. They show them to the right people, and more people start responding to it.
Absolutely. You see stuff that executives will say, executives talk to other executives and they'll say, what recently happened to me? And they'll tell the story. We're like, wow, that's amazing. Who is that person? What are you doing with them? And that's how you get those referrals going as well.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the book is coming out October 15th, but it's available, though, if I'm not mistaken, for purchase on Amazon, right?
You can pre-order it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, and so on. But yeah, it comes out on October 15th.
I love it. So we'll make sure we put the Amazon link for pre-order into the show notes. But if you're looking for it, just go out to Amazon and type in Get the Meeting, right?
Get the meeting. That's right.
Get the meeting. And take a look at this, guys. Like a lot of these pictures and the stories and how people are using to get into people's offices, these actually really work. And so I would encourage you, if you want to get into someone's office and create more sales conversations, then go out and get the meeting. The book from Stu Heinecke. Stu, I love it. If people want to connect with you on social media, what's the best way? Are you out on Twitter, LinkedIn? You tell us.
LinkedIn is the best place. So just my name, Stu Heinecke, S-T-U, and then H-E-I-N-E-C-K-E. Mention you heard me on Mario's show, and that's a big plus. I'm happy to connect.
And dude, if I messed up your name, I was saying it's Stu Heinecke, and you didn't correct me in the beginning. All y'all listening in, that is a royal screw up. It's Stu Heinecke.
I usually hear Stu Heinecke, and I don't even hear it.
You don't even hear it. Okay, that's what I was saying. That's what I was saying.
Oh yeah, he got it.
My mistake. All right, and it's Heinecke. We'll put that into the show notes as well. Make sure when you reach out to Stu, make sure you say you heard him on Selling with Social on the Sales Podcast here. And I got one more question for you, my friend, and that is your all-time favorite movie. What is it?
Contact. Yeah. Not just because of contact marketing, but Contact, it's just so well done. Do you remember it at all?
I don't know. Maybe I don't remember at all. What is it?
This thing is so cool. Jodie Foster and Matthew McConaughey are in it, and it's about making contact with another civilization out in the space. And
I gotcha.
It starts in the SETI Institute where they're receiving signals, and it's then a blueprint for a machine, this incredible machine. It takes all of humanity's resources just to put one together. And they do it, and it transports Jodie way out there, and she meets the aliens. The thing is, it sounds like a silly premise now that I'm telling you. It's so well made. It's so profound. It's incredible.
I remember the previews now that you're saying it, now that you said Matthew McConaughey and Jodie Foster, but I actually never saw the movie. So guess what? It's on my to-do list this weekend. All right, for all of you listening, and we got this very important message. Don't hit stop now. Listen to this very important message from our program sponsor. Thanks so much for listening. Sales managers, before you go, does it feel like everything is a priority and everyone is asking for your time and attention? Here's a free video training that will help you manage your time, double your income, and will skyrocket your team's success. It's called the Sales Management Matrix. You'll learn exactly how to spend your time for the highest revenue return possible. Go to gong.io/matrix to get the free 19-minute video training. Again, that's gong.io/matrix. Go there now, and we'll see you on the next episode. Hey, thanks for listening to the Selling with Social Sales podcast. Did you enjoy that show? If so, would you do me a huge favor and give the Selling with Social podcast a rating and review on iTunes? That would be super awesome. Also, if you want to easily find our show, just go to vengreso.com. That's VENGRESO.com and click on podcast. From there, you'll find the Selling with Social podcast. Thanks for listening in. And until the next show, be awesome. Mario Martinez Jr.